What is going on there, hustlites? It is your friendly neighborhood Professor Chabela Cruz. And you know what? I haven't done a professor's perspective in a year because I have this reasoning. And for the people, for the hustlites that follow the professor, that know the professor, on the old PWHustle network, I used to do the professor's perspective every week. I had things to talk about. Every year, as the years waned, I just got more nostalgic, so I didn't really want to keep up with the current times. Wasn't into it. I needed to be like brought in, like the Godfather. You had to bring me in. Last year, I was brought in by my good friend, my good co-host, you could say, because now and forevermore, if I keep doing the perspective, I'm going to rename it the Professor and Doctor's Perspective here on the PWHustle networks. And you know what? Without further ado, before I even talk about myself, because I am vain like that, because I am so glorious, I want to welcome my man, the Doctor of Wrestlenomics, your friend and mine, everybody's favorite podcaster, the #1 babyface in the IWC, Jeff Lippman. What is going on, my friend? How are you doing?
What's going on, bro? Yeah, it's good to see. It's good to hear you do another perspective. You did at least one since we did the Cody one about a year ago. But yeah, everyone's missed you. I've missed you. And if I can be a catalyst in getting you on more often, that's terrific. And remember, if you are glorious, you can never be vainglorious.
That is true, but you know what? I try to humble myself with all this gloriness that I shine onto all the hustlites. But neither here nor there right now, because Jeff,
yes,
it is the most monumental day, and we're only in the 6th day of January of 2023. No, we're not celebrating the anniversary of the insurrection. No, hustlites. We are celebrating. Well, maybe it is an insurrection on a different scale, but on the wrestling scale, the takeover. The sequel has happened. Vincent Kennedy McMahon Jr. has once again gained control of World Wrestling Entertainment. But you know what, Jeff? It's kind of funny because did he really ever lose any power since he already had 80% voter stock power? In your humble opinion, number one, are you surprised that he is back? And number two, we're going to get into this logistically, but you and I kind of like quarrel back and forth, and we had that friendly Twitter beef, you could say. I think it's a good coercion between Vince McMahon and Nick Khan, but that's just my humble conspiratory feelings. Shout outs to Billy Ray Valentine. But let's go with the logistics here. Were you A, surprised, and B, I know you kept calling this a PR nightmare, but let's go with are you surprised that he's back first and foremost?
Well, first and foremost, I'm really enjoying this preview of season 4 of Succession. Am I surprised? Yeah, a little bit, but not completely. I mean, we always knew that he had 80% of the stock, and that's just of the common stock. He also has, a significant amount of this Class A stock, which only certain McMahons have, not including Shane, who doesn't have any of them.
But isn't the Class B stock more of the voting stock?
It is. Okay. Yeah. Well, they both have voting period. But yeah, the common stock, the regular things that shareholders would vote upon. Mm-hmm. So as the majority shareholder, yes, there was always this belief that he could do anything. But the thing is that with the deal that we thought was cut, with him agreeing to repay WWE for these expenses that they now had to call business expenses, and with him surrendering the rights to certain stocks that haven't vested yet and things like that, and the resignation, not termination, and all of that other stuff, you would assume that they had him sign some sort of release agreement that we could contractually bind him to doing it, to doing that. Moreover, the language, you remember about a week and a half ago, this story sort of creeped up, but then it got eaten away. Nobody covered it anymore because the next day we were talking about Sasha. Then the day after we were talking about Mandy Rose getting released. So maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but whatever it was a one-day story and nothing else. So, the presumption at that point was, okay, somebody just released some stuff from the old story. And then we heard a little bit more about Rita Chatterton and things like that. Mm-hmm. But when he said, I got bad advice, to me, that was, as a lawyer, those are clues, because if you sign a contract, one of the ways that you can, at least challenge it, other than saying that you're incompetent or you're under duress, which wouldn't help them very much, would be to say, I had the ineffective assistance of counsel. So that's where the bad advice, that's why it resonated with me and confirmed my beliefs that there was a contract. As it turns out, they must have just had a handshake deal, which is dumb, which means that, either Steph and Triple H don't have big enough balls to do it. I always thought that Nick Khan was sort of the feather, the olive branch to Vince to say, we're going to keep your guy here for business affairs. And Linda was probably on the other side in my imagination saying, you bring Stephanie back in and, and I won't make a big deal about everything. Anyway, that was my belief. I called it the Treaty of Stamford. I don't know if any of that is correct or not. But he always had that 80%. So without a contract stopping him, or frankly, even with a contract stopping him, he's not afraid of litigation. And he's not afraid of litigation between the family, especially if it doesn't cause any damages. And as of today, the stock went up from $70 to like $85. It won't stay there. But, it's still up. So until there's a downflow, that's sort of the protection, this talking about a sale. But there's been some fine print to that. But I don't want to get ahead of you. You asked me, am I surprised? The answer is, yeah, I'm surprised. I'm surprised that people at the highest levels of business and industry and smart people didn't get an ironclad agreement to keep him out. That said, it's Vince McMahon, so I'm not really surprised about anything. And he still has the biggest balls of them all, for better or for worse.
Well, let's go back, because you said you're surprised about not having an ironclad agreement. Let's try to educate the hustlites, because Track Brown, the dirtiest of the city, he was giving us the comical references of Vince McMahon taking over WWE once again. And shout out to A-Track Brown for the live show that he did. He bestowed on you and me to try to educate the hustlites and try to give them some sort of educational background, which we will do our very best in due diligence. Why are you surprised that I would say this, I'm more surprised, like you said, it's not an ironclad deal, but would have been very expensive within that ironclad hypothetical deal to relieve his powers, if you will, to relieve his voting powers. How expensive would it have that been in July of 2020 Deuce to have him do that? And so this way we wouldn't be in the situation that we are here today.
Well, we don't know. There's still swirling whirlwinds around this thing. There's still open regulatory investigations. There's still things going on with the SEC. Statute of limitations are measured in years, not days or weeks or months. Right. So there's still potential for all sorts of things to happen. So it's hard to say how much it would cost, but it seemed like what it cost is that, we're not going to make a big deal of it. We're not going to release this other non-public information, which we've discovered, because they let that slip in the email exchange yesterday or last night. So there's other non-public information. Yesterday, the board was, we're unanimous against you coming in. And he's like, all right, well, I'm firing 3 members of the board. I'm appointing myself and these 2 people I fired 4 years ago to the board, and then 2 independent members of the board, whatever independent means, left, and he replaced those independent members. So he came back in with 5 members of the board. Which I guess there were some people that were loyal to him or whatever, and or some that were like, he's like, I'm going to negotiate a sale. I'm like, oh, sale, that sounds good. Remember, this is a business. Their fiduciary duty is to increase value of the stock, not to do business ethically, not to comply with the SEC, not to work. The SEC is there to protect the market, which in essence is to protect shareholders. And as long as it's not, wrongly inflating the market, then there's not a problem. Now, on the converse side, part of the problem with what Vince did in the past is that he was insulating the company from potential liabilities, but he wasn't letting them know that it existed. So that's what the SEC is looking into there, partly that he kept out damaging information, which may have adversely affected the stock price to keep it higher. Anyway, that's neither here nor there right now. But
You
how
know
much
what?
would it cost?
Let me
I
just
imagine it would cost a lot.
Right. So let me just backtrack for the hustle I see because Jeff says something very pertinent here because two members are now on the board of directors that Vince fired and was replaced by Nick Khan's, with his duties, if you will. And that was George Barrios and Michelle Wilson. And if I remember this correctly, Jeff, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, but Vince wasn't so kind when he let them go because he kind of accused them of not doing, as you said, making the stockholders happy with certain business ventures, not getting to the numbers that Vince thought that the WWE deserved to be or needed to be. Hence, that's why Nick Khan came into the fold. Now, here's another flip side here. When you put them in the board of directors, I say this is my maybe conspiratory feeling here. The ones that were resigned by Vince McMahon, obviously, to me, were part of the investigation panel, if you will, against Vince McMahon. But like you said, there are people that are loyal to the cause of Vince McMahon. So that's why George is there. That's why Michelle is there. I have to think that Triple H, Steph, and Nick are also in agreement. So that's already, what's that, 5 votes in favor of Vince coming back.
Or they know how little power they have, and so they're stuck there. They don't want to lose they don't want to lose their seats at the table over pride. I mean, it could be. But listen, it's funny because last night Steve and I recorded Hammerlock Hangover, and obviously some of the information is dated. But one scenario that Steve rolled out is, what if there's already a buyer lined up? And I'm like, well, if there is already a buyer lined up, that's going to be both a golden safety net and a golden parachute. And yeah, that's going to make everyone very happy. The stock's going to go up. Everyone's going to get a bulk buyout. Everyone's going to make money. Everyone's going to probably be happy. Maybe, Triple H isn't happy because he doesn't, have his control anymore. Maybe they'll even keep him, though that's not usually what happens. The Mets ownership changes. They fire the GM and the head coach usually, or the manager rather.
Hey, Ted Turner did the same thing too with Jim Crockett. So, we want to go with that corporate takeover.
But not always. When the Ravens were sold, they kept Brian Billick and they kept oh my God, Ozzie Newsome. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they kept the team, so it doesn't always happen, but usually. Anyway, I think they're doing their very best to not make this ugly publicly. But if there is not a buyer lined up, or there's not a good faith reason to believe that there are buyers interested in talking right now, and that gets out, this is going to get ugly first. There's very rarely bloodless coups. It's just a question of whether we ever see the wound or the bleeding.
Let me ask you this kind of scenario here with the people that were let go. Like I said, the 3 that I don't remember the names per se. We don't have to remember the names, but we can rest assured that they were on the investigation panel against Vince McMahon, and that's why Vince McMahon had to fire them or relieve them of their board duties.
Well, to be clear, the whole board, had the investigation going forward, and at this point, outside firms were doing investigations. The SEC were doing investigations. The New York Attorney General's office were doing investigations. So the board was, they were just agreeing not to obstruct, which, by the way, Vince said, we're still going to cooperate fully, which, what choice does he really have in saying that? Mm-hmm. But, and people are acting like the board of directors, if that's a job that he fired 3 people or 5 people. I mean, yes and no. But people who are on boards of directors of publicly traded companies, this isn't their job. They have other jobs. They own the Falcons. They run funds for Chase. They own.
No, what I want to say is this, because again, I understand that we understand that they have. This is like a side hustle. We understand that this is a side. You can say this is a side hustle, but this is a very lucrative side hustle, if you will.
It might be. Not all board positions have remuneration. Sometimes it's just difficult.
So let's just go with the hypothetical that it is a very lucrative side hustle. Let's just say, could it be ugly in a sense that the people that were relieved or resigned, whatever you want to call it, could take it to litigation on their part against the WWE? If not, if they thought that maybe they will get some kind of severance or stock buyout.
Could they? Yes, they're already rich people. Let's say you're right. They get an honorarium or a stipend. Let's say they get $100,000 a month, which is 1.2 million a year for those doing the math, which is a
God
lot
damn,
of money to.
I wish I had that.
So do I, but
Mhm.
that's probably not a whole lot of money net worth wise to those people. But could they go to litigation? Sure. Whether there are grounds, I don't know, because I'm sure they all have board member contracts which realize that they're always subject to the votes of the shareholders, and if the majority of the shareholders vote no confidence, they're out. So what are they going to argue? Some sort of bad faith that the chairman that was put out? I mean, you can always manufacture something. You can always say something in litigation. But if it doesn't work and it doesn't work badly, I mean, you can end up paying legal fees or whatever. But is it possible that that clouds sales? And I mean, sure. I mean, think of a much more banal situation. You're buying a house. You decide, but you break your leg, you lose your job, you can no longer afford the house, but it's too late. The time to cancel the contract's over. You cancel anyway. And they're like, no, you owe us $400,000 for this house, and we're keeping your deposit. Well, you sue. You make something up. They didn't reveal that there were bats in the belfry. The foundation was cracked. You're making shit up. And you probably have no case. But while you're doing this, nobody else is buying this house. No other realtor is putting a contract into escrow. No one else is tendering deposits. Title can't be clear. So you are a giant lien, a giant cloud over the transaction. So if you're going to sue, this is a really great time to sue, because even if you're a pauper, you've got leverage now. They don't want any open problems. So Rita Chatterton and whatever, this might be your time. And Stephanie and Triple H, if you're actually against this, you may want to secretly funnel some funds to Rita Chatterton and the other lady, so their lawyers are no longer on contingency entirely and maybe can go further. Or maybe you're hiring John Wick. I don't know. But yes, the answer is yes, they can. Whether the merits of the case, I don't know. But as long as you're putting a cloud over something where you're trying to negotiate sales rights, that's a dark cloud, and nobody wants that while they're trying to negotiate sales price. And if you're no longer a shareholder, or you've lost your position and you're angry about it, maybe you don't care and you're already independently rich. Well, okay, yeah. Let the bodies hit the floor, as they say.
Yeah, you know what? There's nothing wrong with a lawsuit here and there, because if you got the money and the funds to do it, then you know what? Tie up the courts with frivolous lawsuits between rich people. We are all happy to see rich people fight against each other for money that we will never attain. So neither here nor there.
My profession is. I mean, heck, there's nothing better than a rich client who wants to spend a lot of money until they turn against you and say you commit malpractice. Something like that. That's a story. That's a problem for the lawyers in 2.5 years, not now.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're giving them free lawyer advice here. Jeff Lippman is giving the other side of the coin.
Oh, no, this is just informational purposes. This is not legal advice.
We'll put a disclaimer on the bottom here, but neither here nor there. But now let's go into certain motivations of Vince McMahon, because, again, you talk about the emails and the letters that he sent to the board initially. But the statement that was made, his motivation is the media rights deals. Mm-hmm. His motivation is the streaming deals that you and I know that are coming, and there's money to be made with the streaming rights because they've overinflated the market value of streaming rights. But Vince McMahon has got to get his hands on that. So it was, I guess, the right time to do it because, of course, Fox's deal is coming up at the end of the year or whatever. Of course, NBC Universal is already in step with WWE. They are literally partners. So it's just more of just dotting I's and crossing T's, because we know that NBC Universal wants to be a suitor and potential suitor to buy WWE, but neither here nor there. We're talking about
that is very important, because you said the timing is right, and you're correct, because if he waited much longer, it would just look like he's a spoil sport. Now it's early enough. No negotiations have started unless he started them, in back channels, which is also fine because that's bringing buyers to the table. But it's early enough that it's not spoiling anything that's ongoing. So it gets out there, it gets absorbed, and now that they're talking, and as long as they can hate each other as much as they want, but as long as they present a unified front at the negotiating table with the other side, which I think is what they're trying to do. This is why Vince is saying, I have full confidence in creative and all that stuff, and we're not going to touch Triple H and all that, whatever, for the time being. But if you saw the fine print on what he said, he also said, even if the best option is bringing the company private. Well, who do you think the private buyer is going to be? Him. And if that's the best price for the shareholder, if Comcast offers $74 a share and everyone's out there is going, it's $85 a share now, jackass. Yeah, but when there's buyouts, it's never for the top dollar price. It's always for some bulk amount that's less than right now, but is a lot more than it was before. But everyone gets their money. There's no more tumult. Everyone makes money. Everyone's happy. So if Comcast, let's just say it's Comcast, their top bidder, they offer $74 a share. He offers $74.01 a share, and assuming he's got the financing and whatever, and WWE is getting their money, he has delivered the best value to the shareholders because they're out. As soon as it's sold, it doesn't matter what he does with the company. He can take it to the moon and everyone die of oxygen deprivation. Doesn't matter. There's no shareholders. The SEC doesn't care anymore about that stuff. They may be looking at past stuff, but he can do whatever he wants once it's private. I've worked for a company before they went public, and then they're like, "Shit, we don't want this." And they took a 5 or 6 year approach. They talked to angel investors, Cerberus, and other places like that, and they agreed on a company, and they took their company private again because they didn't want.
And hustlites. Elon Musk is learning to take the company that was public private with Twitter. So I think Vince McMahon, after let's say 21, 22 years, you could say, of being a publicly traded company, finally has seen the light and wants to turn it back into a private company. But again, with the timing, like you said, the media rights, I think, to me, and this is just looking in from the outside, this is me being the fan looking outside, this is too much of a win-win on Vince McMahon's part as far as the shareholders is concerned, because on one hand of the spectrum, Jeff, he's going for the media rights deal. He's going for a new deal with Fox. He's going for a new deal with NBC Universal. Maybe he wants to do the streaming deal again. Let's just say hypothetically, Apple TV, Amazon Prime, Netflix, if he wants to do that. Again, like you said, it will increase the valuation of WWE. So then you can stay with one side of the spectrum. And then, like you said, on the other side, on the right side of the spectrum, is to sell WWE, which is in turn has increased the valuation of WWE stock. It's a win-win to me because he wins either way. I think, and this is what, let's go with the trying to get the TV deal. Let's go with that thing. I think, because I think a lot of people within the IWC, YWC, since they're financially inclined, they know everything financial terms. I remember was it 2018 or 2019 when we saw the dirt sheets, like the Dave Meltzers and the Brian Alvarez's, announced that they signed a deal with Fox and they renewed their deal with USA. But then that word billion came out. Everybody's jaws were like down on the floor because they had to pick themselves up, because before that first deal, a lot of podcasters, a lot of detractors said WWE couldn't even get a deal like that. So he proved people wrong with that.
They're saying it again now. They're saying they're like, oh, they'll get 1.25 if they're lucky.
I think, in my humble opinion, and this is just me, but I think you might agree with this. I think Vince McMahon thinks that the valuation for a TV deal, Jeff, maybe you think I might be crazy. I think he thinks that he could get a $2 billion deal. He could double it. Not 1.25, not 1.35. I think he's going to be looking for a $2 billion deal. And why is that? He could always use the argument that the professors always used for years before AEW became into existence. Dave Meltzer, you took it from me. It's the demo argument. I know you and I will laugh about the demos, but there's some suckers out there, Jeff. In TV land, Fox were suckers. They will, WWE can use that demo argument and say that our valuation can, increase your ad revenues. Our demos that we can attain on your channel can increase your ad revenues, your marketing strategies, and all that stuff. We know it's a ploy. We know it's a cop-out. We know it's a lie. But I think Vince McMahon could say, my thing is worth a $2 billion deal. What say you on that?
Well, I mean, first of all, they already get, over their deals. I mean, if you want to, accelerate them, they already have $3 billion deals, one with Peacock, one with Comcast Universal for USA Network, and one with Fox. And they get something. Nobody's quite sure what it is, but they get something for NXT. So there's already that there. So it's certainly realistic. But the company, who buys them, I'm presuming would get all the shows, the option to do other shows, I guess Main Event 2, Level Up, whatever. they could do a women's show if they want to. They get the PLEs and whatever was pay-per-views, but they also get the IP, and this is why I think it's Comcast Universal, and that is because Comcast Universal, while it's a very large conglomerate, doesn't really own a lot of IP. It's been a while since I've been to Universal Studios theme parks, but last time I was there, the two things I remember was Marvel and Harry Potter. Now, Marvel is owned by Disney, so how long do you think it is before Disney gets those rights back and puts those in Disney parks? I don't know. Maybe it's another 3 years, another 4 years. If it's another 20 years, it doesn't matter. These companies think long term. Harry Potter, who owns Harry Potter, and how long will Harry Potter remain popular? I mean, J.K. Rowling's been semi-canceled, but whatever it is, I'm not sure who owns Harry Potter. But if you own WWE, you have an attraction right there that's good for kids and, maybe even some adults, like Marvel was for me. We'll go, okay, cool. It's the same rides. You just have sell different shirts and have different people in outfits. And, you hire muscle guys or whatever. You hire some 6'5" people down there to walk around, with tattoos and whatever, whatever it is. They can have theme restaurants in the parks, and you have the entire catalog, the whole thing. If you're Peacock, Peacock, the anchor tenant of Peacock is WWE. That's their anchor product. That is their number one driver of viewership, more so than any of the TV programs or the movies. Now maybe FIFA and maybe the World Cup or tennis
and Sunday Night Football, they get like drivers.
Yeah, right. Maybe like the Olympics, but the only thing 52 weeks a year is WWE. It's the major. It might be the major driver period, but it's the major constant driver. So all of when you buy the company, you buy everything, and eventually the rights reward. And don't forget two places where WWE doesn't have TV deals yet. Japan, okay, maybe a big deal, maybe not. The other one, China. That's 1.3 or 1.4 billion people. And eventually somebody's going to give them a TV deal in China.
Yes, but again, they have to fall in line with what China wants in terms of ideologies, in terms of honoring communism. So that's another big battle. I don't know if Vince McMahon is going to convert to communism, Jeff.
Well, China isn't communist. I mean, it says it is, but it's not. It knows it's not.
According to 45, it is. We blame, they blame China for everything. So I don't know if you want to convert, everybody.
You can blame China for a lot of things. They're at least a contributing factor, but they're not. They're an oligarchy. I mean, there's oligarchs, that are controlled by the government, but it's the same. It's like a Russian. Kleptocracy. Well, Russia's a kleptocracy. China's an oligarchy, but it's not important. But the only thing you need to change is maybe you don't have like a Hacksaw Jim Duggan going USA. Aside from that, what do they care? They don't have any anti-Chinese characters.
Yeah, well, the Patriot wouldn't make it in China either. So, neither here nor there on that one.
The Patriot wouldn't make it now, period. I mean, Lacey Evans tried.
Again, that's already two characters that won't make it in China too. Lacey Evans, if she rebrands herself as a pro-Chinese person, that would be the gimmick that gets her over.
Or the Patriot is like Sergeant Slaughter, a heel. It'd be fine.
Wow.
And by the way, I don't know that China cares that much about what's on WWE wrestling. I mean, there's a big difference between wrestling that's on their TV versus the move, like a Marvel movie that $1 billion are going to be spent in China on that. And now, or the Fast and the Furious, whatever. I don't know, but I don't think it's that hard for wrestling to comport with what they want. Let China, they can edit the whole goddamn thing. Who cares? It's a closed internet anyway.
But as like a lot of corporations and a lot of businesses do, they want to expand to China because it offers a lot.
Sure. There's 300 million rich people in China. There's a billion poor people, but there's 300 million rich people. That's like if the United States, if everybody was rich.
Yeah. Oh, God. And then, again, that's why Vince McMahon is seeing the money. He's seeing the greens, hustlites. So, you know what? Let's go into this realm here because, again, you're right. I think, again, Comcast for the IP is the most sensible thing to do. I just think that he wants to see the media rights thing. I think he wants to milk this before he sells off. Do you agree
Well, he
with that,
just
or you
wants
think?
to take credit. I don't know. I mean,
No, no,
I,
no. I mean, like, I'm not
I
even
never thought he was
denying
going to
that.
leave. This is the result I thought was going to happen. The only thing that surprised me is when he actually stepped aside.
Yeah, I was actually surprised too because I thought there was really nothing. Let's actually take a step back because I want to talk about that. When he did retire, I was a little surprised. I think he was too because again,
I was on
it
Wrestling
didn't.
Soup. I'm on the record on the air. I was on the mesh with, what they called it Frank and Mark because, Frank is Mish and Mark is
Mhm.
my middle name. So it was a Frank and Mark. And I'm like, he's going to ride this out. He doesn't care. He doesn't want to spend time with his family. And Mish was like, yeah, he wants to spend time with his family. I'm like, no, he doesn't. That's not the way he's wired. He's going to think this is going to blow over. And guess what? He's probably right. It was everything that happened from resignation until yesterday that surprised me. Now, this surprised me again for the reasons we already touched upon. But this is what I always thought was going to happen.
Well, to me, I thought he was going to write it out for a different reason because I didn't think it affected the bottom line. It didn't affect his dealings with USA. It
Right.
didn't affect his dealings with Fox. It didn't affect his sponsorships because I think to me, and I think hustlites, you're going to have to get your head out your ass on this one. And this is not a knock to y'all, but this wrestling bubble is so small. Nobody cared on the outside what Vince McMahon was doing. Yes, it made noise on ESPN. Yes, it made noise on Wall Street Journal to talk about the indiscretions that he had, the NDAs. Rita Carterton, what's her name? Charterton? What?
Chatterton, I think.
Chatterton.
In 1987, by the way.
Right. I'm just saying, but it was news about that on ESPN and Wall Street Journal, but it didn't affect the bottom line. And that's why I said he could ride this out. Would he win? Yeah, I think he could. I thought he was just going to pay a fine and then he was business as usual.
Still. But this is like, I think this is baked in the cake. You expect a 70-something, captain of industry that basically was the king of his world, that he's going to have all sorts of indiscretions, and some of them are going to be bad. And, I mean, I don't want to say that like Bill Cosby and Harvey Weinstein and Donald Trump and, Bill Clinton and John Edwards, but you can go down the list. It's harder to find someone who's successful who doesn't have affairs, and doesn't, this is PR, but it's not the kind of PR anyone cares about. I mean, and everyone's talking about Saudi Arabia, and I mean, the World Cup was just in Qatar. It's the same country. I mean, it's a different country, but it's the same culture. It's the same rules. It's the same restrictions. It's the same
money that Fox, and it's the same money Fox accepted to
Fox. Forget Fox. The entire world paid to be there. Every country that participated in the World Cup happily went to Qatar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know how many Bengalese and Pakistani migrant workers died working in 125-degree heat, building fake cities and stadiums. Thousands. Nobody cared. You think they cared that Vince McMahon had affairs and paid the women millions of dollars? I mean, Jesus Christ! If he was worried about that, he could have just hired $5,000 a night hookers. No, he wanted the thrill.
Mm-hmm. And you're right, because he was bored. We know this. He was actually bored because, again, he's a single man. He was doing his thing. He was living the nightlife. He was celebrating his birthday with John Cena, Hustlites. He had this woman in his arms that no one knew about, but we knew he was not, diddling Linda McMahon because she's trying to run, Donald Trump's 2024 campaign.
Time out for 1 second. Weren't we all surprised that woman was almost age appropriate? Like, weren't we surprised that she wasn't 28? Like, that was a 50-something-year-old woman.
Maybe he paid for her for the PR. We don't know what he does behind the scenes. We don't know the bedroom. We don't know. Maybe those are 19, 20,
we
21
don't know
year
what he
olds.
does on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Well, technically, we did when he was CEO before he retired or resigned the first time. He always said he was up by 4 a.m. He was in the gym and then he went to work and then he didn't.
There's different kinds of work. I'm just saying, every day he could have a different flavor every day. I mean, when you're a billionaire, you can do that. But there was probably some thrill of, the Christy Hemme or the, whoever, the various women were, obviously the spas, he pushed his luck a couple times. But for every time he pushed his luck and got rebuffed, I bet he pushed his luck probably 6 or 7 times and was successful.
Absolutely, I agree with that 100% because you know what, he loves this. Like you said, he's a narcissist. He's
Right.
an egomaniacal sociopath who
Over
loves
testosterone narcissist. Exactly.
yes, he loves to test the limits of reality. He loves to test the limits of what he can get away with, and he's
And we're
done it
not
time and time
endorsing
again.
this.
No,
We're
we're
not
not.
endorsing or condoning it or whatever. It may sound like we're sort of laughing and being like boys in the locker room and whatever,
We're
but
just stating the obvious. That's what we're
yeah,
stating.
stay in the obvious. And the outside world, the investor class, the advertising class doesn't care until it's something like a Chris Benoit. It's got to be really bad for them to care about something moral over value.
Absolutely. So, you know what? There's one more thing we have to talk about. And during this supposed like all hands on deck meeting, do you remember certain quotes that were said? You know, it is going to be business as usual, but at this time. So,
Yes.
you know, he is trying to protect himself because, like they always say, like Meltzer's always said, plans change. So I want to ask you this. Now, legality speaking, you know where I'm going to go with this. He's protecting himself with the at this time. But I've seen some court documents and he said the saying one thing that you don't have to worry about your job, you don't have to worry about your job title. Legality speaking,
That means nothing.
it
Those
doesn't mean
words
nothing.
mean nothing. They're just for PR. They're just to, try to assuage the troops, maybe to send some sort of signal of unified. But legally, that means nothing. It all means nothing. All of these folks are independent contractors under, with the same. As far as I know, they haven't changed the wording and the verbiage of WWE contracts. It's just they've been more liberal about allowing outside of WWE ventures like Carl Anderson, like Nakamura, like doing Twitch and stuff like that. And that's why it was so hard to decipher what was going on with Sasha Mercedes, because they were being more liberal about it, so you really couldn't tell, and she wasn't saying anything. But anyway, that stuff doesn't mean anything. There's no such thing as a moral contract. Now, the people who are actually employees, I'm not even sure what state they're employed in. I don't know if they're employees in Connecticut, in New York, in Florida.
I'm not trying to go with the wrestler per se, but I want to go with what his first intentions is about the media rights and maybe selling the WWE.
Right.
He's technically, he says, I'm not trying to get back into the creative, day-to-day operations. He wants to leave that with his son-in-law. He wants to leave that with the people that Triple H has entrusted. Again, quote unquote.
You know what
but
it was?
Again, legality speaking, right? But legality.
He saw Bronson Reed. He's like, this is too much.
Oh, well, he saw Top Dollar do what he did. He said that's too much.
Yeah, you're right. He had to plan this for about 3 or 4 days. No, yeah, I don't know. It's just funny because I don't much like Jonah Bronson Reed because I used to, and Steve never liked him. And then one day I realized I'm like, what I like in this guy? And then you ever know somebody and like. Everyone says that they smell, but you never felt that they smelled. And then one day they walk by you and it stinks, and then you can never unsmell it. That's how I felt about Bronson Reed ever since that day. And so it's like a recurring joke that
the clog in your nose is lifted and you can smell clearly. Yes. That's what it is.
Exactly.
But that's the thing. I think a lot of like the IWC and maybe the Vince haters or the Vince fearmongers are going to use that and. To a degree, hustlites, you are right. You should be scared because Vince McMahon could change from one day to the next. So how do you feel about going to work the next day, like Monday morning?
Insecure. If you're Bray Wyatt, you feel insecure. If you're Karrion Kross, you feel insecure. If you're the Good Brothers, you feel insecure. If you're William Regal, you're like, holy shit. I mean, come on, go down that list. Eric Young hasn't even shown up yet, but he's going to be on that list. I mean, if you're Shawn Michaels, you feel insecure. So yeah, then there's I won't be surprised if Triple H, if that pacemaker or whatever he's got in there, has already been replaced. I mean,
or upgraded. That's what it is. Yeah, put some Duracells or some Energizers. You got to add some more voltage on. Yeah,
he may need to have a couple of like portable generators at all times. I don't know. I'm and again, I'm not saying you're wrong, but again,
certain people will say, well, he said this, but legality speaking, if he changes his mind, can something happen? Could some kind of, investigations, could some kind of litigation? Again, so we have to educate the hustlites. It's something that, we have to teach each one.
He's cutting costs. How does that affect anything?
Well, technically, he can't cut costs now, because if he cuts costs, we know that he already has another woman in WWE offices. He can't do that. He's got to be good for about a year before he starts cutting costs again.
No, he's getting rid of dead weight. The only one who improved ratings was John Cena. So we'll invest in John Cena and Logan Paul, crypto scammer. But Johnny Gargano and Candice LeRae and Tegan Knox, they're not doing anything for my brand. And you took the title off of Ronda? She's a star. What are you talking about? So he's cutting costs. What's the consequence? They pay them 90 days to not compete. I mean, that's the consequence, just like it was before.
Well, remember, Jeff, the good news.
There's still only two big companies in this industry. So even if a wrestler had a case, none of them have ever sued, and anyone who has ever sued has never been successful.
In what realm you're talking about?
Any realm. The concussions. Andrew Yang trying to organize a union with Soraya and Thea Trinidad. Nothing's worked. Stephen P. New, is losing cases to Ring of Honor, Sinclair, for God's sake. I mean, they're nothing.
The only winner, like I said, the only winner I know is Jesse Ventura. He said it. He won against WWE. So we have to at least
settled a case. Jesse Ventura.
Settling is still winning in the eyes of the public.
I know what you're saying, but it's not. It's. I mean, usually the definition of settlement is everybody walks away unhappy.
All right, let's go back into the hypotheticals, because you knew that you was kind of laughing at me when I said this, that this was all a ploy orchestrated by Vince McMahon and Nick Khan to get to this point that we are here. And I find that still believable in a sense, because again, Nick Khan was handpicked by Vince McMahon. He hired him to do this kind of bidding. Nick Khan's original agenda.
So you're saying that Nick Khan wasn't the betrayer, he was the poison pill, he was the mole all along?
Yes, he was the mole all along. He was the double agent all along, because his first job, first and foremost, was to increase the valuation of WWE. It was to increase the brand awareness. I don't have the numbers, I don't have the statistics on me right now, hustlites, but I think Nick Khan has done a pretty good job of what Vince McMahon asked him to do for WWE. So,
well, their big contracts were done under Vince McMahon's leadership as well.
Right. And so to get even to this point, I think it would behoove Nick Khan to bring Vince McMahon back into the fold, because now he wants to either sell WWE or get a bigger piece of the pie in the media rights. Nick
Khan doesn't get to bring anyone into the fold. He's got to be obsequious and hope that either you're right and he was always in the fold, or Vince McMahon takes him into the fold. Listen, based on what you're saying, how things played out, I cannot rule it out. I'll give it a 15% chance. I don't think so, because as smart as everyone likes to think,
you gave me a bigger number than I expected. I thought you were going to give me like 3% on that.
No. I mean, the way things have played out and the way that in business Vince is Machiavellian. But let's not forget that the last actual good work that Vince did as a swerve in wrestling was the WWC fake buyout. His ideas of good works since then was giving birth to a hand, having God as a tag team partner, and saying it was me, Austin, all along. I mean, he hasn't exactly been giving us creative works in a long time that were any different than anything that Billy Corgan or Tony Khan's been giving us. So, he ain't that clever. So I don't think so. But in business, he's the GOAT. Listen, everybody thought that Elon Musk was a genius until he managed to lose $200 billion in 2 months. So, sometimes people are just lucky or have the right product or have the only product or have the balls. And he's got the balls. So I can't rule it out. I didn't think so, but I don't think so. But you know what? I'm going to give this one to you. Let's just say it's juicy enough to be correct. It's deliciously spicy.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I could go with that. Like I said, you gave me more credence than I even anticipated. I thought maybe you have a 3% belief that this conspiracy could happen. So before
I'm enough of a cynic to know that there's more than a 3% chance that that's possible.
So before we close,
because this is really neat. We haven't seen much bloodletting yet. Again, it's a day.
You know why? Again, the perspective had to come on just to talk about this because it was too juicy not to talk about. And I needed you to be here for this because I'm having fun with this. But before we close, we have to go into another kind of realm on this. And it is the business end, not for WWE, but for the professional wrestling world. So this is more hypothetical. For Vince to be involved with this in any way, shape, or form, you've seen a lot of the social media posts, you've seen on the PWHustle Facebook fan page, how many media group, whatever the case may be. Most people are saying, well, Vince McMahon wants to kill his creation. He wants to kill WWE. He's egomaniacal and all this stuff. Now, my question is,
right? He's the Joker is killing Kim Basinger. If I can't have her, nobody can.
Again. Well, if Kim Basinger is the WWE, I want the WWE myself too. But neither here nor there. But if he wants to kill his creation,
in 1989,
yeah, that too. She's not that bad right now. I mean, fine wine. They always say that. Some people age like fine wine, but
maybe you've done older. I don't know.
Yes, I have. But I'll go with this. The hindsight, if he wants to kill his creation. What is the ripple effect of that for the professional wrestling world in your hindsight? Because the reason I asked you this, because I know you always love these tweets, and I always hit the like mark on this. You want to remind the hustlites, you want to remind the YWC of the fault of AEW killing the indies, NWA in their position in the wrestling world right now. New Japan viewership not in the millions like people hope for. Impact is Impact. They're cockroaches. They'll never die, but it's still a small secular group. But the state of professional wrestling, if Vince McMahon kills his own creation, what do you think, hypothetically, would be the ripple effect of professional wrestling itself? Would it go back into the Fight Club mode where it's just, the vocal minority, the silent minority, whatever you want to call it? What say you, Jeff, on the ripple effect of him trying to hypothetically kill his own creation for wrestling itself?
It's interesting because if you go by traditional market forces, there's one answer. The X factor is Tony Khan, who doesn't do anything that we can see based on the market because he doesn't need to worry about it. And if he continued to be that way, who knows? But let's just say Vince did kill it. One, you're putting 300 to 400 wrestlers that are training on the free agent market. So there's a glut. I think AEW would be the big winner because now there's, two networks and a streaming service that had wrestling and presumably won it. And so now he's got bidders all of a sudden, which he didn't have before. If he's Ring of Honor, maybe all of a sudden becomes something that has a value because it's really just an alternate AEW. I mean, you could put half the roster there. And so you could have a lot of winners. You could also have people who, because they love WWE, they hate AEW no matter what. And maybe they turn back to NWA or MLW, no matter how bad those products are or Impact, maybe they just stick to it. And because they stick to it, those products get more money. And so they can get better. So who knows? It would probably be good in the short term for professional wrestling. But if the networks are like, nah, we only wanted the big guy, we're done. Well, then it just continues to go slowly eroding, dying. I mean, it really would be in the hands of what the networks and the media conglomerates see the value of wrestling as. If they see it as, well, Vince killed it, so it must not have any value. So they move on to something else like UFC or, anime or samurai movies. It could be the end of it. So it could be very much either. But despite being a cynic and despite reveling in the joy of things that go wrong in wrestling, mostly because I predict them and people argue with me, and I'm more invested in me being right than good things happening in the world. I do want wrestling to succeed and thrive. So I hope it's the former. I hope is that there's bidding, that now also Ring of Honor.
But if you have the chance to be so right, would it just, could that just take more precedence?
This is where I've got my real Jekyll and Hyde conflict, the Laotian conflict in being right, but never getting to be right again because the thing that I preach upon is gone. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that the Jeff of that day would have to realize that it's in the near term and long term interest of the Jeffs of tomorrow for it to exist, so he can continue to find things to be unhappy about. So yeah, I think even that Jeff would rather it be bucket number A rather than bucket number B. I also think that there's something about live entertainment, and I do think that there would be, it only takes one network to say, well, now there's a big vacuum in the market. Hey, there's a product here that can fill it. They have this brand, they can't do anything with it. We can do something with it. Or maybe, Billy Corgan's not nothing. He's lost his mind, but he's not a nobody. He's Smashing Pumpkins. He can get meetings with people. So he says, like, give me a budget. I can give you something good. I was doing $500,000 a week on YouTube, and I was still doing $250,000 even after Jim Cornette made a dated racist joke, and then COVID killed me. But, give me a budget. I will deliver you a good wrestling product.
And if those people are gone from WWE, he can add those to the new
there are people.
To the
there's Freddie Prinze Jr.'s, there's Billy Corgan's, there's Eric Bischoff's. There's people who want to get back into the business, whether they admit it or not. Jim Cornette, who, if enough of them get together, they could put together pitches. So I think that as long as there's a perceived, listen, they're on a lot of TV shows that do $700,000 viewers an episode. There's not a lot of franchises like The Big Bang Theory and Friends who you can still get 500,000 or 1 million people watching reruns.
Again, this is a very good a very good hypothetical, because again, WWE, no matter what, hustlites, they start something, and if the ripple effect is positive, maybe Ring of Honor gets a TV deal. If it's negative, then a lot of people just will have to go on Fight TV or ProWrestling.net just to try to watch wrestling ever again. That's the problem here. So we will never know. So
what do you think it's going to be? You asked me. You've got to answer your own question.
I would actually think of the latter, because again, I think, call me a cynic here, but I think Vince McMahon wants to keep the WWE going for Shane McMahon's children. He wants to keep that generation.
That's not the scenario. You laid out the scenario that Vince McMahon is sinking the Titanic. So you've got to answer your own question. Well, you don't have to do anything. It's your show. But
it is my show. But I would go with this. Again, the ripple effect would be short term. I agree with you. AEW would actually benefit short term. I think Ring of Honor would benefit short term because, again, you would fill that void that WWE, has taken away from let's say USA Network or maybe Fox. Ring of Honor could get the TV deal. Tony Khan can do what he can expand more because WWE is not on the radar anymore. So the short term, I agree with you 100%. The long term is kind of tricky, again, because I've always said that wrestling will always have its core audience. Now, whether, could it be profitable? No, I don't think so. But I think it can, let's just say, break even, because you'll go to the arenas, you'll go to the armories, you'll find it on the Twitters, you'll find it on your social media. Will it be profitable? No, it'll still be around. It just will be more of a core audience that will try to find it. And it'll be the new tape traders. You just will find it somehow, some way. But will you be invested in it? For me, no, I like the big leagues. I like the WWEs. I like the AEWs. I like the New Japans. I want the big leagues. But again, the smaller leagues, maybe I'll have to try it. I don't know how invested I will be, but I will try, Jeff. I will try.
But they might feel bigger if all of a sudden 11 people have to take the minor league contracts because they have nowhere else to work, and all of a sudden they get a new roster of faces that and like. But anyway, it's you never know. I don't know, but I think we're both saying that wrestling will survive. It will not. It will not slowly die. I think as long as people looking for entertainment options, there will be a place for it. So strangely, we're both sort of bullish on this. Either way it goes, it's just a question of how bloody or bloodless this particular palace it's Napoleon retaking his throne. So, we'll see. And to be continued. I mean, I expect there to be information every single day coming out on this that will clarify it more to see how right or wrong we are. And if there was any way for us to know in hindsight that we were right or wrong at the time, because I don't think so. There's just so much that we are not privy to. We're really just guessing and reading into words and saying, when someone says at this time, are they being or is it just they don't want to commit to anything? They're saying, let's see how it goes. I mean, it could be at this time. Well, I'm going to sell it to Comcast next week. As far as I know, Comcast, might bring in their own team. So anyway, listen. I appreciate you inviting me on your perspective to give you the doctorate's perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming on the perspective. Like I said, it's the professor's and doctor's perspective from here on out, because you are a friend of the show. You are a friend of the hustle. So
I need friends.
Of course. You got a friend in me. You got a friend in me. But anyway, Jeff, plug Hammerlock Hangover. Plug all the other podcasts that you are. You're the hardest working man on podcasting out there.
I am the hardest working man in podcasting out there. Listen, I'm always happy to be on the professor's perspective. I'm happy to be on other shows. But yeah, the wrestling podcast I do regularly with Steve Pena is called Hammerlock Hangover. We release it every 2 weeks. It's on The Hustle. It's on the PWC. It's on Wrestling Soup Network, or you can just find it, wherever fine podcasts are found. My non-wrestling podcasts are Garden of Doom and Garden Views. Garden of Doom is sort of things that go bump in the night, ufology, theosophy, religion, history, some pop culture in there, monsters, mayhem. Garden Views is more topical, legal topics. We have Sean Cannabis Law, a few shows on cryptocurrency. I've got I did a show on the moon on it. I've got one coming up on cybersecurity, which is also going to talk about cybersecurity and cryptocurrency with a guy who used to work in the White House doing just this. So pretty dope stuff. And I'm also on a lot of shows on the PWC, which we ebb and flow with our frequency and shows. But, I'm typically on 2 to 5 shows a week on the PWC, subject to our friend Down Under.
All right. And you can find me on my Twitter at PWHustle That's PWHustle And of course, you can find me on the most nostalgic podcast out there, the PWR Pro Wrestling Reflection Podcast with myself and the Tommy Wonder. So for myself, the Professor Chabela Cruz, and the Doctor of WrestleNomics, Jeff Lippman, we say good night, and we'll see you next time here on the Professor and Doctor's Perspective, here on the PW Hustle Networks on the YouTubes. Peace, hustlites.
Stay with my friends, and at Icarus Fell MD on Twitter.
All right.
I always forget that.